Hi, I'm Jay Jacobs, and welcome to another episode of Going Beyond the Scale. Today, I have a very interesting guest, a guest that came to me through a good friend of mine, Stephen Vieser, probably 6 months ago. And I reached out to Dr. Kevin, and he and I hit it off, and I love what he had to say. And I don't know what, maybe I've never had COVID, but I must have gotten COVID brain, because then I kind of disappeared. I never followed up with him. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. So a couple of weeks ago, I reached out to him and apologized because I just got distracted. And we had a chance to reconnect again. And what I love about our conversation today is there's a way in which his background and his experience is very interesting. You're going to find a lot of interesting things, I believe, from our conversation today. And it was funny because before we went live, a lot of times we'll be talking and checking in with each other about certain things before we go live. And I told Dr. Kevin that I am not somebody, and he'll explain why this came up, I'm not somebody that goes to Google and diagnoses myself. I don't do that. I go to the doctor and find it out. The worst part that I do is I get the diagnosis and then I don't follow through on what I'm supposed to do, whether it's my CPAP or like I have piriformis syndrome on my right leg. Anyway, I think I'm starting to finally get my head out of my butt and realize that maybe I should take some of my own advice that I also give to other people. So I'm just putting myself on blast and letting everybody know that I'm going to be also listening to Dr. Kevin today. More importantly, taking on some of the things that he will share. Kevin, Dr. Kevin, thank you for being here.
Hey, Jay, thanks for having me.
So I guess the best way to introduce you is, as I said, my good friend Stephen and I, who had worked together at Bamberger's many moons ago, known each other for a very long time. He reached out to me, and obviously he's related, but he spoke extremely highly of you and what you were doing and what you were up to. And I said, yeah, I'll talk to him. But then when I talked to you, it was like, okay, Stephen wasn't blowing smoke. He really knows that the things that you're doing are great and they're very interesting. So what I'd like you to do a little bit is we're going to go into some of the specifics and things that you do for people. But what I really liked was when we were doing some of the pre-interview chat, really what I find interesting about you is your background, your backstory obviously has had such a big powerful way that's direct to the course of your healing that you're doing for people. So I know when we talked a couple of weeks ago, you were concerned because there was an inciting incident that happened that you thought, well, it could throw people off a little bit. But I think it's important. I think it's extremely important because such is life and things happen. And I think the more people understand how you came to do what you're doing, and then what you're doing as we talk a little bit more about this, they will listen to what you're sharing in a whole different way than just like, yeah, I have certification, I have this, I have that. So I'm going to now be quiet, which is an unusual thing. I'm going to be quiet and let you just kind of share with us how this kind of all came about, and let's just lead into it that way. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'll first start with what my background is. I'm a certified athletic trainer before I became a chiropractor. And what that is, so athletic trainers are healthcare professionals, and they are trained to be basically the primary provider of a given population. So typically it's a sports setting, but that our profession has grown to be in the industrial and in the performance setting. So basically what the athletic trainer does is they're responsible for navigating somebody when they get hurt at the time of sport, like whether it be in a practice or a game. The athletic trainer is always there. They see the injury happen, and then they guide that athlete through whatever stages they need to go through to make sure that they get back to playing their sport or doing their activity safely as soon and as safely as possible. So when I was young, I was always an athlete. I grew up playing sports pretty much every single day. Omitted some of the schoolwork just because I liked sports better. And I knew as soon as I got to high school, I learned what an athletic trainer was. And I was infatuated with what the athletic trainer was doing. So I went to college for that at Springfield College. And during that experience, I was working with some of the teams during my clinical field work, but just like I said, we're designed, our job is to take care of a specific population. Now I was also a resident assistant at the time, during my senior year. And what really shaped me, because I was at that time, I was going through the process of, discovering, do I want to become a chiropractor? Because, that's when I was starting to apply towards the school and starting to get myself geared towards the next step after I graduate. During my senior year, I was a resident assistant. I had 14 students on my floor. So it was a relatively small floor. It was 14 guys. And one of them, first 5 days of being on campus, committed suicide, and I was a first responder. And that was a very traumatic experience for me. When people are scared, they come to me scared because they're afraid of getting their neck adjusted. I know exactly what they're talking about because I've held a broken neck before. I know what that feels like, and it is something that I take very seriously. And I know what it means to be empathetic when somebody is scared of that, because I know how important that is to life. Now, that was obviously, I had to go through the mental training. I had to go through, PTSD. I went through counseling while I was going through chiropractic college. So that gave me an idea that you need to take care of your mental health and be able to recover from that. Otherwise, that event that might shape you might also instead break you and completely change the course of your life in the other direction, where who knows, maybe I wouldn't be sitting here doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
So it just really shifted me, and I used that experience as a strength instead of letting it, get in the way. I used it to my advantage, and I let it add into the healing experience that I bring towards others.
I think that's one of the big distinctions I noticed when we had our first conversation. And I think luckily enough, there's more of an understanding and a willingness for people to not vilify mental health. And what from your experience, one of the things we were kind of joking about a little bit was the fact that, how many people come to you and they are self-diagnosing and telling you what they have. And my question was aren't there people that come to you and they say, I have X, Y, and Z, and you're kind of like, you find
more
out
often than not.
Yeah. And what was the, you were somewhere and you were near some company and that was part of the problem? What was that?
Yeah, well, I went to Chiropractic College in San Jose, which is Silicon Valley. And our school was in the middle of Google, Yahoo, Cisco. So when I was in student clinic, we would have people working for Google saying, I Googled this and found out that I have, they have the text neck and they have carpal tunnel syndrome from typing on Google too much. And yeah, it happens a lot. And a lot of times I feel bad, but when a patient shows up and they tell me their diagnosis before they tell me their name, when they tell me, they instantly, right off the bat, the first words out of their mouth is, I have an L4, L5 disc herniation, or I have, some sort of condition that they have lived their whole life by from that diagnosis and onwards. There's actually a recent study saying that people have worse outcomes if they get an MRI compared to when they don't. So, and getting an MRI worsens your outcomes, because even if you have something on MRI, doesn't mean that it's causing any sort of pain, but because somebody attaches to that imaging finding, they might live their whole life by identifying their health and their themselves with that diagnosis.
It's interesting you say that, because a personal experience, one of the things I had on Biggest Loser was I had not knowing it, I had what they thought was a near fatal heart arrhythmia. I never had any heart issues at all, but when they did a stress test, they pulled me off the machine. I didn't feel anything, but they had a concern about it. And long story short, it ended up being from having sleep apnea, and I stayed on the show, and they kept me fully functional and all that. And then a couple of years ago, I had to have a hernia operation. So to go get this hernia operation, I'd see a cardiologist because they had to check for the anesthesia. And what I've never had a doctor say this, and I bring this up because I get a feeling that you're this kind of a person. This world-renowned cardiologist, he hadn't even tested anything yet. He was good. He did everything he needed to do before I did the stress test. And he said, I have one question. And I said, what is it? He says, how do you think you are? And I said, I actually feel great. I feel good. And he said, to me, that's the most, he said, we're going to do all the tests, but he said, that's the most important thing. And I think that's what I got from the conversation with you. If people are willing to do it, you're that kind of a person that will diagnose and support them. But I also got the sense from you that the way that you're doing things with people is you're also supporting them, not just the physical part, but if they're willing to move them forward, where they're moving beyond just whatever that story is that they've got, that they're living right now.
Right. Actually, I had a patient recently, and I made him laugh simply because of the shift that I made, just from a question really similar to what you just alluded to. And I asked, like, they come in and they're in a ton of pain, and they think about getting themselves out of this pain. But I simply asked the question of, how do you want to feel? They know how they don't want to feel, but they don't think about what it's like on not just at the break-even point, but past that.
That's great.
And it just made them, like, it just sort of, it took them back, because they had 20 years, whatever, of all this discomfort and pain. They can't think of how good they could feel. They just know how they don't want to feel.
I love that. That's great. I've never heard that said that way, but that's very powerful, really powerful. And I think that could correlate to a lot of other things. The other thing I wanted you to share, because you opened up with it a little bit, I misunderstood at first, and then when you kind of corrected it, I got it. When I thought you were a personal trainer, and you said, no, I'm athletic trainer. And I got that because we did on Biggest Loser, we had athletic trainer people that were able to keep us functional, because we were like, property for them. They want to make sure no matter what was happening, we were okay. And I really did get to respect and understand it, because it wasn't about us getting fit. It was really about us being functional. So you have such a big background from a professional place with professional athletes and teams, and on the Olympic side, whatever. What for you, I'm sure you have people that are athletes, but for a lay person, like, they might say, well, I'm not that person. I'm not a professional athlete. But I would tend to think, because you're dealing with lay people and also high performing people, that you have such a wide range. How does that fall into, like, for an average person that might come to you? How does your background and the depth of your experience really support them as well?
It's an amazing question. The biggest thing that I've learned, why it's so much better to have somebody who has dealt with athletes, is because, first of all, you're dealing with complex movements. You're dealing with the most complex movements, and you're helping them do those complex movements at the highest level. So anything like slower than that is like seeing things in slow motion for us.
Okay.
So you're finding all those small details, those really intricate things, where you're not talking about dropping 10 seconds off your mile, talking about dropping the slightest fraction of a second.
Yeah.
The other thing, and this is really the biggest point that I like to drive home, is the sense of urgency. Like, even though they're not an athlete, they have life to get back to. They have kids to take care of. They have something, and we need to get them. They need to know that we are responding with the urgency, just like we're responding to the urgency of that player needing to get back into their sport. And when they hear that, when they know that I'm trying to get them to get back to the life that they actually want to be experiencing, I'm doing it as fast as I can.
That's great.
I'm not taking my time.
Yeah.
Because I know what it's like to be kept on the sidelines, and being kept on the sidelines in a sport is just like being kept on the sidelines in your own life.
We didn't talk about this, but the more I listen to you, you're in New Jersey, so you were on the West Coast and you've been in many different places, but you've kind of, for now at least, I'm not saying you're never going anywhere else, but you've planted yourself in New Jersey. Do you have, like, is there a way in addition to what you can do with somebody face to face? Like, are you also starting to think about how you would be able to, whether it's through speaking or writing a book or doing I don't know, is there any way that you can take the practice that you have as well and eventually be able to expand that where it doesn't always have to be in person? Is that a possibility in your craft, or does it always have to be one-on-one?
Well, doing things with my hands is the only thing I've really been dedicating my attention towards.
Sure.
But there's obviously ways to, create a message and create some sort of style and message you want to put out to whoever it is around the country. When it comes to actually treating people, I'm sure there's wellness consultations, there's ways to get reimbursed, and there's ways to make a living besides just doing hands-on work. But that's not necessarily the type of thing I'm focusing on right now.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to a book, I feel like I need to have something that's pretty creative and something that I'm willing to put my heart and soul into. But right now, I have to focus on what's in front of me, which is kind of building a presence in my local community before I focus on, all around.
Yeah, I only bring that up mainly because of the fact that sometimes I'll see something in somebody, and same thing like happens when you maybe see a patient. Like, there's certain times you meet someone and you can tell that there's something that they have where you might not be able to treat somebody. But I've done this sometimes with people where I've in a different way. I try to get them to understand that they're responsible for their care with the doctor. They don't need to be the doctor, but the doctor really needs to hear from them and be open and honest and transparent. And what I get from what you're doing with clients is you're very much that way. So I think that, it could be 5 years, 10 years, I don't know, whatever. I'm just bringing it up and just planting a seed, because I think that a lot of the things that I've heard you say offline, and then even some of the stuff you bring up today, they're very important, because I think there's a lot of times that people will go to a doctor and they don't tell things, and the doctor, there's only so much you can know, because there's a whole, as you know, 360 degree of stuff that's going on. So I think that when you said to me that you treat the whole body, I think that there's a curriculum there in the way that you're doing things with people. I think eventually, and it may be nothing more than you be a more podcast, only because it's just, I think it's almost like karma. The more you're able to just express it and share it, I think it'll help people. So I just offer that as something. I know you got enough on your plate, but I just offer that as something, food for thought for something down the road. And you know what? Sometimes something would come out of the clear blue sky that you didn't even realize. Somebody will call you up and say, "Hey, I'd like you to speak at this conference," or whatever. It'll help you in New Jersey as well too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always open to ideas like that. Just right now, it's obviously an interesting time given the whole pandemic, and starting a business during the pandemic is, I kind of got my side view mirrors kind of tucked away for a second.
Totally understand it. Totally understand. The other thing I wanted to I asked the last time is, like, what does your logo mean? Like, I'm looking at the logo, I'm like, what is, so tell us about, I love your logo, but it's like, I didn't understand it at first. And then when you explain it, oh, I get it. So
sure. So first, let me, at least for the people watching, I don't know if they know what my logo is. So it's right there. So throughout my entire life, ever since I went to Springfield College, I've always seen the triangle has always been a recurring theme. Mm-hmm. So I'll just explain right now, and then I'll put the card away so I can actually talk to people. So it's an equilateral triangle. There's an ocean at the bottom, there's mountains, and then there's, the sun. Now the equilateral triangle it represents equal health and spirit, mind, and body. Now, Springfield College, that's in the mission statement. That's what, that has been preached to me since a very young age. And throughout, even after leaving college, I kept seeing that, the importance of that and the preaching of that being seen by some of the some incredible people, and they always highlight the importance of that balance.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I've, taken, and I've started to own it more and more. And that's my goal, is to own it as much as possible and continue to embody it. And also help my patients to learn how to embody it and appreciate it. My journey has brought me around the entire country. So the mountains represent the middle of the country when I was living in Durango, Colorado. The ocean represents the coast that I've lived in, because I've lived in Jersey, California, Florida. So it's that the water has been in abundance, but the mountains were also an important part of it. So, and then the sun, I just love the sun. So
you did. Yeah. And you mentioned about people don't get enough vitamin D as well.
No.
And so from your perspective, what is the importance of the vitamin D? I know some people have a belief that they know, but from your perspective, what does it mean?
Well, it is really responsible for, regulating hormones and just making sure the body, the gene regulation is optimal. The vitamin D is such an important cofactor with all these different interactions in the body. And if the body is depleted of that, which, a lot of studies, actually tons of studies, are now they've been revealing that was the biggest common denominator in hospitalizations for people with COVID.
Yeah.
They had vitamin D deficiency.
Wow.
So, and that's why we saw, well, not the only reason why, but a big factor why during the winter months we saw such a big spike in cases, was because people were inside, it was cold out, and people were gathering in groups for the holidays.
Yeah.
And then as the winter continued, we still saw cases, kind of plateauing, but at a high level. And it's just because people were not getting outside, and people were not able, there's also a factor of being outside in open air.
Yeah.
But, now that I'm hoping once people are able to get outside, get some sun, be in the warmth.
Yeah.
We'll see a much better, much better world, and hopefully a healthier world.
The other question I had for you on Thursday, and we kind of moved the schedule around a little bit because of with your schedule. On Thursdays, a lot of times we're talking about travel. It's starting to happen. People are moving around, like what you said. They're getting out more. They're going to start doing some things. Just curious. I mean, I know people could Google it, but we have you here. We don't need to Google it. When we think about people being more active, or hiking, or getting on airplanes, being stuck in a seat for a long period of time, without having to come see you because some issues arises, are there some things that you could suggest for everyday, any of us, that are the kind of we should be paying attention to, in terms of, like, my posture is never great. My wife is always like, your posture is horrible. So it's sometimes like, oh, I got to pay. Like, what is some things that we probably should be paying attention to that would be helpful to us in terms of movement or travel or anything like that?
Right. Awesome question. Definitely an important thing for me to talk about, because I can't tell you how many people I've had to tell, like, I should have some sponsorship for, like, the Bluetooth keyboards, because I've told everybody to prop their people who started working on laptops. My laptop's elevated right now, so I'm not like hunched over, but lifting the laptop up so it's eye level, and getting a keyboard so that you can type with your shoulders down is step one. Also, getting up, standing up, moving as much as you can. Don't sit for long hours of time. Go by without standing up, stretching, trying to move. Anything to help get the hips into an extended position, because from sitting so long, our hip flexors like to shorten up. And if we're in that poor posture, our diaphragm is not able to work as optimally, or if at all. So we're not able to fully expand the lungs, and that's going to keep us from getting that deep breath of air and relax. When those two things kind of go hand in hand, when our hip flexors are shortened and our diaphragm is not working, what that does is it hyper compresses our low back, our lumbar spine. And that leads to low back pain. So now we got, see how that sort of cascades?
Yeah.
So just getting up, trying to obviously improve the posture.
Yeah.
Try to get our hips back and opened up, because our movement should be coming from our hips instead of our low back. And just getting our shoulders back, taking deep breaths in, and try and expand the rib cage, not elevate it.
Interesting. I have an interesting one for you. When my top weight was 435, heredity has a lot to do, obviously, with muscles and things like that. So my upper body strength is fine, but my legs are very strong. Like I can do a lot of weight leg pressing. Okay. And I always ascribed to heredity from my father, and also the fact that when you're carrying around that much weight, in my mind, you're carrying around like a gym. Like when I always kind of laugh when people put on little ankle weights, because I'm laughing like, oh my God, I had hundreds of pounds on me. I don't need ankle weights. But I had a trainer. Now, he's not an athletic trainer. He's a personal trainer. Nice guy. But I'm very curious, because he said something to me that he never elaborated on it, but it was shocking. I said, yeah, I have really strong legs. I have these strong quads. And he said, no, you don't. I said, what do you mean? He said, it's not your legs. He said, it's your hips. So his thing, I don't know if it's true or not. He claimed for whatever reason I was able to do what I was doing. And then you just mentioned the hip thing here. So what is the correlation of, like, I don't know if you call it hip health or not, behind the scenes here is Gloria, who just got her hip replaced, and and from arthritis, and she has another one's arthritis as well. But you don't hear a lot about hip. Like, tell us about the hip side of things. What is that about?
Well, the hip, so I go grab the spine, but I'm connected to headphones. Yeah, the spinal column goes down, and then, oh wait, I got a hip here.
There you go.
There we go. It's always on hand. So we have our spine, that's obviously midline of our body. And then the first place where that weight distributes in half to go into our legs is where the hip sockets are. Okay. Similar to how the shoulders are a ball and socket and allows for a lot of range of motion.
Yeah.
Our hips are the same type of joint. Okay. And they're responsible for creating a lot of movement. The problem is when we sit for so long, and when we don't move from our hips, when we bend over from the back, and instead of going into a full squat, and we continuously lose the habit of moving from our hips. Okay. We start to put a lot of pressure on the areas where all the spinal nerves come out. Interesting. And that leads to a lot of compensations. If we're not moving from the hips, we're going to have basically compensations all over, up and down, even all the way up to the top of the head. Interesting. It sounds like something in the world of, without Googling it, but it sounds like something about hip health, because I don't hear a lot about it. Like I told you, I have piriformis syndrome, and I'm not doing what I need to do around that place. But I can see where that's the only thing that really is ever an issue for me. And somewhere along the line, I think I need to pay attention to that, which I told you before. I need to come see you so I can find out. You can take a look at. I'm not diagnosing it. You can figure out. You can tell me I'm full of it or whatever, but we'll find out. I didn't diagnose it. That was a doctor said that. So we'll see. So Kevin, we could probably talk for hours, because I know this is the tip of the iceberg of the things that you're doing and know about. And so you are, what I will say to people that are in New Jersey in the general proximity, you're in East Brunswick right now, your office? Okay. Yes. So we have in the show notes, I posted it earlier and we'll continue to post as well. What I would like people to do is, if you're in the area and you want to be able to have a better understanding, I can tell you that I'm not a doctor, I'm not a subject matter expert, but I get to talk to tons of people all the time. And I'm very impressed with Kevin's philosophy, what he's been doing. He comes highly recommended. So I would say, take a look at his website, look at his Instagram, reach out to him, have a conversation, and, follow the things that he's sharing with you. That's one thing. The other thing, before we kind of sign off, what are the actions that if you were to just say to people,
what's something you really would recommend people do? Like, what's something they should do?
Going for a lot of punch here, but just try something new. Definitely try, like, this was a cool experience. The pandemic, as devastating as it was, because people started to sort of try different things because they were sequestered inside and they couldn't do what they typically did.
Yeah.
But you start to learn, you learn a lot more about yourself when you start going outside of your comfort zone. You start learning what habits you have, the way you treat yourself when you're going through something that you might not necessarily be good at for the first time. If you're treating yourself that harshly when you're first starting, I can only imagine what it's like when you have expectations that you should be good at something. Like, the way you're not performing the level that you should, that those habits form, and a lot of times we fall asleep at the wheel with our thoughts and with our emotions and with how we feel. So just the more you kind of step outside and do things that you haven't experienced before, the more you'll be able to enjoy life, become a little bit more well-rounded of a person, and also have a little more familiarity with what your habits are and see if you can change them.
I love that suggestion. One of the big kind of the mantra we have for going beyond the scale is for people to live the life that they love and to live it well, because you kind of, back to the balance thing, you really need both of those areas. And I think that what I love what you share about going out of your comfort zone, there'll be people you run into. It's like, I have 20 years experience. I have 30 years experience. And I love when somebody said one time, do you have 30 years experience, or do you have 1 year repeated 30 times? And I think, what you've shared with your background, what you've had a passion for, how you're healing people, your background, being with people that are the highest performing athletes, all of that, and the fact that you have traveled around, and that I think coming from you, when you say that, come out of your comfort zone, you've obviously been doing that. And I think that's the reason why I'm always interested in people to do that, because I think at least when there's something that comes up, you have a whole portfolio of different ways to look at something. You're not just rigid, and prescribed. I think you have more of a chance for somebody to be heard. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I think that you have as a talent, is you're a great listener. And I think people need that. Like what you said, like right now, they really need somebody that they can be heard from, and also somebody they can trust. So I want to thank you for your patience, Kevin. And when I reached out to you, and then I disappeared for like 6 months. And I'm glad you're
I disappeared too. So.
We all disappear at times. I'm glad you're settled into New Jersey. I know Kim and I are both going to come see you. We both would like to get a kind of a baseline of where we're at. And like I said, I recommend anybody in the area that's near, reach out. And if you're not near and you have a question, reach out to Dr. Kevin, and he'll be able to give you some guidance. And you can also know that he'll probably be able to direct you or give you some guidance on, like, if you're going to go to somebody where you live, there might be a few questions he can give you that would help as well.
Wow. Thanks, Jay. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Kevin. And for everybody, that's it. Thanks for your generosity being here today. And as I said, follow Kevin on Instagram, and also go to his website, and don't be shy. He won't bite. Reach out, email him, call him, have a conversation, and see what you can do to, live the life that you love, and to live it well. So thanks a lot, everybody. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks.